future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome and good morning. Good morning. It is Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. Yes, welcome to Raging Chicken's Out the Coop podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Today we got a special show for you. Yep, today's special, joins our growing network of podcasts. On Monday, Out the Coop Live. We talk to progressive activists and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards from across the country. On Fridays, Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And check out the Wednesday show. Our Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril's a progressive columnist from the Bucks County Courier-Times, the Intelligencer. He normally joins me to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania international politics. Cyril's on a bit of a hiatus right now. He's kind of like, he's just grinding out the work lately. So we've taken a little pause, which has allowed me to bring you this little back-to-school special today. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbeans, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress. And if you're listening to this show on the Podbean app, well, you can show us some love right now by hitting that green patron button at the top of the page. You can also help out the show by heading on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. And make sure you smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you'll know every time that we go live. You can join our Discord server. The information on that is down in the show notes for today. And look, if you want more progressive talk, you got to tune in to the Rick Smith Show's daily live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook. Look, wherever you get a stream, you're going to find Rick. You just got to head to the ricksmithshow.com for all the latest across all his platforms, because he's got a show on Free Speech TV. He's got a show just recently, got the show, landed a gig for a show at WBAI in New York, which is absolutely fantastic. The voice of the working class going to New York. It's fantastic. Then you can check out all his stuff right there at ricksmithshow.com. And you also, look, you know what I'm going to say, right? You got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind the podcast rock the house, and they know where the bodies are buried. That's the reason alone to tune into that podcast right there. Yep. Make sure you follow them on Twitter at the Night Caucus and subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. And they got some live streaming that's going on there now too, which is fantastic. Attention gamers, the Game Inn, that's the Game Inn with two N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s to the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, you name it. And look, with the start of school, you definitely want to be headed on over there with your kids who are gamers. Why? Well, with every A they get on the report card, those kids get a discount. You can check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at the Game Inn. And look, if you've got a question, you look for something that's hard to find, shoot them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Check out them. Really, it's a great place. I love those folks. Special shout out once again goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan. That's with two N's. Again, at SongADayMan on Twitter. Well, today, normally, like I said, we have the Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko has been going on Wednesdays, but we take a little bit of a hiatus as Cyril is burning the candle on both ends and trying to keep up with all the kind of craziness that's going on in Bucks County School District and board meetings, which has been crazy. Hope we're going to have more about that on this Friday when we talk a little bit about what happened at Penn Ridge and what's happened to the Bucks County. Not Bucks County, the Central Bucks School District. But we'll leave that for another time. Today, we've got a little bit of a kind of a special show. Okay, I'm just decided. Look, I didn't want to let this go any longer. In part for my own kind of need to talk about this, and also since Cyril and I are taking that little hiatus, I wanted to bring you something in the middle of the week. So on today's show, we're going to dig into Kutztown University's back-to-school plans. Now, if you've been following the show at all, you'll know that the Kutztown University administration has been a bit, well, belligerent, let's say, when it comes to ensuring the health and safety of faculty, staff, and students. Like during the last academic year, KU had one of the highest rates of COVID in the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. They were number 3, right? As the Delta variant rages, KU is determined once again to head back to campus using public relations to fend off the risks. Yep, PR will do it for you. That's how they usually handle things. Well, okay, look, all credit is due. There is a mask mandate, but there will be no requirement for notifying the university of vaccination status, no systematic testing to get ahead of an outbreak, and no contact tracing, right? And when some faculty and staff and students began to say, wait, well, why can't we do this? They're like, well, it's voluntary. To make matters worse, the administration has denied some faculty requests to keep an all online schedule, right? So we're going to be teaching in person, but because of the health risks, especially the possibility of contracting COVID, they said, look, let's do this all online. University says, sorry, nope. No accommodation for you. Even ADA, like American for Disability Act, requests are being denied for when it comes to kind of COVID in particular. On today's show, we'll get into the story of one faculty member, Steve Oross. He's in the Department of Psychology, the Psychology Department, and he is being forced to make an awful choice between his job and his personal well-being. Today, we'll set the stage for what's happening, and next week, we'll be talking directly to those faculty members on this podcast, right? Steve has already agreed. Just want to be clear from ahead of time. He's already agreed. He's shared with me everything I'm going to read to you today. He's given me permission to use his name and his story, and we're looking for scheduling a time where he can come on next week so he can tell his own story too as well. But I wanted to give you a heads up and a little context. So when we have him on the show, you don't have to hear me going into all the context again. No, we can get right to his story. Now, look, there's some faculty who are not taking this lying down, and that faculty nowadays there is a petition, or rather, they're calling it an open letter, that is circulating among faculty, staff, and students and parents, and they are calling on the university to require vaccination, or at the absolute very least, mandate regular testing for unvaccinated individuals. Right? Seems mess. And hey, why not throw some contact tracing in there too as well, right? Yep. You can check out the petition at bit.ly, that's bit.ly/KU Fall 2021 petition. Or if you're watching right now on YouTube, you can check it out right here. I put it right there in the today's chat. There's a link that you can go directly there. Good morning, Emily. Emily is joining the show. And yes, time to reinvigorate the labor movement, Emily says. I agree with her 159%. There you go. So, look, let me give you a little context before we head right into Steve's story. So, as I mentioned, Kutztown University was near the top of the PASHI schools, the Pennsylvania State System University schools, with COVID cases thus far, right? It has been. And it should come as no surprise that one of the main reasons for that is because Kutztown University's president, Kenneth Hawkinson, was insistent that everybody return to face-to-face classes, and he would not budge on this. We should also say that his decision, it wasn't just because at the last minute things went crazy. No. Once the COVID cases first started breaking out in before March, but March 13th, 2020. Yes, I'll remember that, a day that lives in infamy. And yes, it was a Friday the 13th. That's when everything got shut down. And even back then, Hawkinson was reluctant to allow classes to stay online. He wanted to insist that we return from spring break and head back into the petri dish that would be the classroom. But eventually he relented, in part because of the state saying, hey, you got to do this. That was probably the only thing that really did it. But immediately faculty members started thinking about, well, look, this is a pandemic. We don't know how long this is going to last. And again, remember, this is the spring of 2020. We don't know how long this is going to last. But look, the writing was on the wall. We saw what was happening in New York City. We saw what happened in the outbreak kind of in the state of Washington. And then it looked like this was going to spread rapidly and spread fast, right? So those faculty members got to work. A team of faculty members, did this kind of independently for the most part, and said, look, we're going to look into try to find ways of mitigating or keeping us safe, basically, for the fall return. So they spent some of their own time over the course of the summer, right, researching best practices, finding out what other universities are doing, and putting together a list of recommendations that they would give to the administration, really as kind of like, hey, look, we can help too, right? There was a spirit, I think, initially of, look, we're all in this together. Let's figure out how we will make sure that we keep everybody safe, especially our students, right? And we can't keep our students safe if we can't keep ourselves safe, right? It's like, it's the it's the airplane rule, right? That you got to pull the oxygen mask down and put it over your own face before you can help somebody else, right? Because if you're not going to be healthy yourself, there's no way that you're going to be able to help somebody else, right? So you take care of yourself and then you help others, right? So that was kind of the idea. We're going to do it all at once. All right, we're going to make sure that we're safe so that our students can be safe and so that, the business of higher education can go forward. Most of those faculty members, I would say most faculty members at Kutztown, myself included, were not fans of online teaching, right? For me, the classroom is the place where, you really get to engage, you really get to have a kind of connection with students and so on. So I had as much as of an incentive to kind of get back into the classroom as possible, right? But look, I'm not a martyr, right? I'm not going to go back into the classroom like just because, right? I'm not going to be an idiot about it. I'm going to go back to the classroom only if I'm going to be ensured that I've got, my safety is taken care of, and my students' safety, and the community safety, and the staff safety, right? So those faculty worked over the course of the summer, produced this kind of amazing document that kind of laid out kind of like how we could do this going forward. And just like the administration out of hand rejected it, wouldn't even talk about it. We were even urging them to have town halls, like online Zoom calls with parents and students and faculty members who were concerned about this, not to kind of like, make any debate. This is in the middle of the summer, right? There's very few classes, if at any, going on at the time, right? There was no kind of pressure. There was no campaign at that point. The idea was like, look, we're all in this together. We got to get together and start talking about some of the concerns that we've got so we can better understand our context as an entire community, an educational community, which includes people like in the town of Kutztown, right? And the families of those students, right? All that kind of stuff. They outright refused to have those, right? It was pretty remarkable, right? And I have to say, right, the only faculty members that did this too, there seemed to be a resistance from other organizations, including the University Senate and the faculty union, our local faculty union at the time, to be able to have these town halls too as well. It was kind of like a little bit bizarre, but this group of faculty members kind of kept on going. There was a petition that came out as we kind of approached the semester, calling once again on the university to follow protocols, right? And they refused. And what happened? Well, Kutztown University forced all the students to kind of come back. There were kind of a few kind of accommodations. There were some of us, myself included, that was able to get an accommodation to kind of do all online teaching, but they were still forcing the majority of faculty, staff, and students back to campus in person. They moved students in, and within a week, cases started spiking, and everything got shifted to online. And all those students who came to campus, right, had to make a decision. Are you going to stay? Well, you have kind of like a week to decide, if you want your housing money back, right? Well, if you rented an apartment privately, too bad for you. But if you rented in the dorms, we'll give you a housing refund if you leave by this time. And so then there was a second move out that took place. I think it was like a week or two after the start of the semester. Right. And then suddenly that, you have this kind of quasi ghost town of a campus. Right. And even then cases start spiking. So you had, let's be clear. So Kutztown University was number 3 in the state system of higher education with the number of cases, positive COVID cases. Right. And most of the students had left. Right. Because they saw that what they had signed up for was not what was happening. They were told, yeah, we're going to do all this. The students were finding that, the only reason that they came to campus is because they were told that that's going to be all online classes, and they had to come. And then they got there to find out that a bunch of their classes had turned to online classes. So they're like, what the? And then they left. Right? So it was a disaster. And again, look, I want to. No, I was going to say, what I was going to say is, like, I understand that this was a difficult situation for everybody. But the fact is like, look, I'm not going to give credit or try to, cut them some slack when we knew at the time what was going on. We have the documents. I can show you the documents, right? That, these faculty members put together, right? That showed you what we could do. That was based upon best practices and what other universities did. As a matter of fact, there were some universities in the state system of higher education who got it right from the get-go, right? Why? Because they read the freaking news, right? They talked to actual health professionals, right? And they thought about the safety of their community. So just give you the example, Westchester University, right? That is the largest university in the state system of higher education, right? They dwarf everyone else in terms of the size and the number of students. They're also kind of right on the edge of kind of a much more populated area, right? They looked at what was going on. They said, you know what? We're going to go all online. And they said that, I think it was like in July. They let everybody know ahead of time, right? They spent their time working with faculty and staff members, right, in order to make sure that they could deliver their education in kind of an online environment. Right? So they put their efforts into planning. And they ended up with 280 cases of COVID. While Kutztown University, a much smaller university, right, had 535 cases. The only two universities above Kutztown were Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP, which, if memory serves, they required all first-year students to come back to campus. And then there was this kind of like piecemeal work for everyone kind of above that. I think they wanted graduate students back too, or something like that. And Bloomsburg University. IUP had 609 cases. Bloomsburg had 587 cases. This is according to the New York Times College University COVID cases tracking reporting. Right? And that was this is last updated. I should be clear about this, was last updated in May. Right? So this doesn't account for anything that's happened over the summer. Okay, so Bloomsburg University, which, by the way, the president of that university, Bashar Hanna, is the one who's been appointed to lead those three universities that are being forced to consolidate: Lock Haven, Mansfield, and Bloomsburg. Right? So that guy who was number 2 in COVID cases in the state system of higher education for one university is now going to be asked to look over 3 universities. Kutztown University, right, all by itself, decided to get 535 cases. Right. And these are the ones that have been reported that we know about. We also know, and again, I don't want to get too much into the, second, third hand knowledge, but I know for, through what students have told me, that they had, in several cases, multiple friends who had COVID, but they were afraid of reporting that they had COVID to the university because they thought it would negatively affect them. Right. So while they were home, right, they went home, but they had COVID, but they didn't tell the university. Right. So there were things like this. There were people who were sick who may not have been tested, so we never know. There's asymptomatic people because testing was not something that was done on a kind of like a regular mandated basis. Right. If you remember back in 2020, we talked about this, what Cornell University was doing, for example. They had a very science-based return to campus stuff. That was mandating testing. They had these best practices of kind of, these different pods, these living and learning pods, so they can making sure that you can isolate any outbreak of the coronavirus. None of that at Kutztown. Okay, so that's the context. All right. The other thing is you got to understand that the university went through a rebranding campaign, spent several $100,000, if not $1 million, on this rebranding campaign, right? Because Kutztown University is nothing if not like a PR hound, right? They believe that everything can be solved with kind of beautification and public relations, right? Which is why they're most afraid of when their school becomes less beautiful and people can't see the beauty of their campus, or when they have bad PR. Right, that's what they fear the most. right? Because that's where they put all their energy and resources and money and attention. So as part of their rebranding campaign, they had this kind of "It's Good to Be Golden" campaign. They rewrote their mission, their sets of values, and all this other kinds of stuff, right? And I want to read you a little bit about from that mission, right? So their mission is to provide high quality education at the undergraduate and graduate levels in order to prepare students to be lifelong intellectual, ethical, social, and career challenges, right? All that kind of stuff. But here's their vision. This is the kicker. Kutztown University aspires to be a regional center of excellence, providing opportunities for advanced academic, cultural, and public service experiences within a caring community designed to promote success in a global society. And as part of their purpose, they say, the university values the life experiences of students, faculty, and staff to create a caring community on a beautiful campus. Right, so this is in their kind of mission and values statement that they've got on their website. You can go check it out. Don't need to kind of take my word for it. Go check it out. Okay. So, and if you listen to President Kenneth Hawkinson talk, he'll often bring up how KU is a caring community. And when you could provide any kind of criticism or offer or point to problems, he often says, no, we're a caring community. We take care of each other. Well, look, as someone who's been at Kutztown as long as I have, I've been there since 2002. I know what they're saying about this being a caring community is a crock of, right? And that's just from experience. That's from hearing the statements. And look, early on in my career, I bought in, right? I really believed, like the former President Javier Cevallos, I was like, all right, this guy's talking when I hear about like community engagement and, support of the students and all this. And then I watched the practices contradict the words almost immediately. And over the course of years, being able to kind of expose that guy as just being an outright liar when it come to kind of like saying that Kutztown University was in a financial crisis and all this stuff, we were able to uncover that was a complete, utter fabrication and lie. We have the documents, right? Go back and look at my reporting at Kutztown University. It'll show you. So we have that caring community, quote unquote, right? And one of the concerns, obviously, with COVID is that while many of us are vaccinated, right? We don't know how many. I certainly am. I'm vaccinated. Like my son has got vaccinated. My wife is vaccinated. My daughter, she's under 12, so she can't be vaccinated yet, right? But I mean, and most people I know that that I work with are vaccinated. Although we did have a faculty member yesterday try to kind of make an argument to the faculty listserv that all this vaccination stuff was, not real. We shouldn't even think about requiring that. But so it just shows you that education by itself does not necessarily lead you into a direction away from the conspiracy theories and all that. Anyways, so Steve Oross is a faculty member in the psychology department. Okay. And I've worked with Steve over the years. I mean, Steve was the guy when the university was like hearing from their accreditation people that they had to kind of have an assessment plan and all this, right? Because Steve had some experience with statistical work and he had done some of this kind of assessment stuff, he agreed to kind of step forward and lead some of those original assessment plans. And he basically volunteered time to help the university. He volunteered his own time. He went department to department to try to work with faculty. And look, faculty sometimes, especially stuff like assessment, are not going to be easy to work with. I certainly was not easy to work with. I still think the way it was happening with all this assessment is just nonsense. It's busy work and it's something here, but that'll take me another week. But anyways, like he was a good soldier for that, right? I mean, he actually did, and look, he listened, right? He was trying to talk about how to go up with it. So he did all this stuff for years. Right. And that didn't make him the most welcome person. Right. They'll come over and say, OK, we're going to talk to assessment. And then you get into a room of faculty. We're going to roll their eyes. Oh, my God. Right. But look, he did it because he believed in it. Right. And he wanted to help out. And I remember when they first decided, oh, you know what, we need to put some resources behind this, right? We're going to hire like a vice president of assessment and put together a team of all this stuff. You know what the first thing that they did is they said, bye, Steve. We're not going to give you the resources. We're going to go hire somebody else. We're going to go hire somebody else as an administrator to come in and do this who has no experience at the university. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. And so they just blew him off. I mean, that was like, well, that's beside the point. I just remember that as kind of being like, you got to be kidding me. But so now Steve, he had, I want to get this right. Steve had a heart transplant back in February, right? I didn't know about this until he was sharing this here, right? I was, especially last year, I had my blinders on. We're trying to kind of keep everything together in my house and my kids home with, schooling and trying to teach online, all that stuff. And so if this kid came out, I didn't know this, right, until just recently. So he had to have a heart transplant, right? It's pretty serious. And from everything that he said, that he's kind of conveyed to me too, as well as like, it's been a tough go. But, he's been doing the therapy. He's been, going through all the exercises and kind of the medical treatment that he's needed to kind of get himself back up to health. Right. And at some point, right, he had to take a leave last year, right, because of the heart transplant. Obviously, you're going to get a heart transplant. It's not going to be like, okay, you can be back in the classroom in 2 weeks. So he had to take a leave last year. And just some point this summer, later in the summer, his doctor basically said, listen, we think it's okay if you kind of go back to work. Right. But they had a whole bunch of concerns with that. Right. And, the idea you have to watch stress levels, obviously, like that. And obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, just as the Delta variant is spiking. You're at high risk. Right. So Steve, being the stand-up guy that he is, right, he doesn't, he said, well, I want to get back to work. Right. But I've got to take my health into consideration. So he writes this email to Human Resources, to the Director of Human Resources. He says, hello. Unfortunately, I find myself in a position of having to request approval to conduct my fall 2021 courses and office hours remotely. Would you please let me know what specific information and forms are to be requested from doctors? Right? Just very kind of, look, I don't want to do this, but this is what we're going to have to do. And so he sends that. And let's see. A week later, he gets an email back from the Director of Human Resources, Jennifer Weidman, and says, good evening, Dr. Oross. I understand your concerns about returning to the classroom in person this fall. Unfortunately, there is no provision for you to convert your in-person courses to an online modality for the fall semester. As you know, the flexible work arrangements only pertain to the last academic year. You could apply for an ADA accommodation, but under the ADA, an accommodation is not considered reasonable if it is a fundamental alteration so significant that it changes the essential nature of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations offered. Changing the modality of a course from in-person to online would be considered a fundamental alteration. You could continue your leave contiguous with your FMLA leave from spring, using up to 15 paid sick days and 2 personal days for the fall semester. After that time, your leave would be unpaid for the remainder of your semester because the limit of 90 paid sick days in any given calendar year. You use 75 days in the spring 2021 semester. While unpaid, this leave would still continue your benefits, so please let me know if you wish to pursue this route. I recognize that these are not the answers that you want to hear, but these are the constraints within which we are operating at this time. Please let me know how else I can help. You get that? Said, look, you can go ahead and file an ADA request, but I'm already telling you right now that we are going to make a case that you shifting from courses, in-person courses, to online classes is going to not qualify for that ADA. So I'm just telling you, you want to go through that, you go ahead. I'll give you the links. But we're going to tell you right now, we're going to consider that a fundamental alteration. a fundamental alteration so significant, right? Now, remember, in the middle of a semester, faculty members shifted from in-person to online and worked our tails off to deliver the same kind of quality of education under the worst conditions. And now they're saying, oh, no, that's not even the same thing. That's not even the same thing. They told us at the time, oh, we're going to make sure you know the same thing, right? Okay, so Steve, justifiably pretty pissed at this point, writes back the next day, says, hello, Jennifer. I did receive your response to my request for remote teaching considerations given my high-risk status defined by the CDC as a recent, less than 6 months ago, solid organ heart transplant patient. I do thank you for your response. I would be lying, however, to say that I respect your decision to deny my request for remote teaching. This is due to the fact that, as you state, this decision will require me to take unpaid leave despite undergoing an intensive pre-surgery evaluation process, a major surgery, and then developing and maintaining demanding lifestyle changes involving nutritional changes, repeated blood testing, heart tissue biopsies, cancer screenings, 4+ months so far of participation in physically demanding cardiac rehabilitation program, etc., in an effort to be able to return to work. An effort, I should note, that has led my doctors to approve my request to return to work under some conditions sooner than they had anticipated. Although, upon reflection, perhaps I should actually thank you, as your decision has also given me options of retiring or applying for disability. Yippee-yi-yo-ki-yay. I only have one question for now, given that I may be asking others in a different context at a later time. How did KU decide that remote teaching constitutes a, quote, fundamental alteration so significant that it changes the essential nature of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations offered, unquote, thus rendering it an unreasonable accommodation under the ADA? This decision, in my opinion, is especially curious given the framework for remote teaching and fulfilling other professional obligation has been in place, available, and has been used for quite some time, extending back to actual pre-pandemic times. I have 3 other reasons for asking this fundamental question. 1, the answer will prove helpful to other members of the KU community that are being placed in a similar situation as mine. 2, it is my understanding that the ADA requires such a decision to be accompanied by a written statement explaining the reasons for reaching the decision, and he gives a link to those requirements under the ada.gov. And given the transparency that Kutztown University strives for, don't we, this statement should be shared. And 3, the American Federation of Teachers, and gives a link to this, along with other organizations, seem to take a different perspective when they state that remote teaching should be considered a reasonable accommodation under the ADA during this pandemic. I look forward to receiving your answer to my question during this ongoing pandemic. I am sure that it will be useful for those of us being put in situations that are forcing us to choose between surviving financial losses or surviving the virus. You got that? I have to say, he had more restraint in this email that I could possibly have mustered at that time. I am, this is like a month before the semester, and he gets hit with this ton of bricks by saying, no, sorry, I'm not going to help you. Despite the fact that he even says in here, right? He worked extra hard, underwent this voluntary, wasn't required to do this voluntary rehabilitation program so he could get back to work. He put in his time. He made the effort to get back. And they're like, sorry, get your ass back in the classroom. Or leave. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. It's pretty remarkable. It's pretty remarkable. So here's the response. The response is, "Good afternoon, Stephen. My email should not be construed as a denial of an ADA request. There is a process to request an accommodation letter under the ADA, so you would contact Disability Service Office to begin that process. Should you submit the request for accommodation, it would be evaluated and responded to according to that process. The shift in a course scheduled as in-person to an online modality is the fundamental alteration I referred to, not remote teaching in and of itself. The university has a duty to students who have signed up for and expect face-to-face classes to be delivered in that modality unless and until directed by the Commonwealth authorities to discontinue face-to-face instruction." And that's it. And that's it. So guess what he does? He goes through and he files that paperwork. He jumps through those hoops. She said, "Look, I'm not saying we're denying it. Don't construe that. There's a process for that. You just go ahead and go through the process." So about 10 days later, he writes back to the faculty listserv and says, "Well, to all, I received a, quote, confidential email this morning from Alexis Martin, an employee relations manager in HR, informing me that my ADA request was denied. This means I believe that I will be forced to take unpaid leave for this semester and will not be able to return to KU. More later, as I'm too pissed to respond in detail now. I will keep you informed as I evaluate the next steps. I sincerely appreciate all the supportive notes I have received from you. They have helped me move forward during this asinine process. For now, I will leave you with this lyric from Pink. Quote, this used to be a fun house, but now it's full of evil clowns. Unquote. Signed, Steve. So there's your context, folks. There's your context. And this is, like, let me be clear. This kind of thing, this disregard of workers at all levels is happening all over the country. Kutztown happens to be in my backyard, but I know this is happening everywhere. A friend of mine who teaches out in Chicago, Columbia College of Art and Design or something like this, Columbia College in Chicago, sent out this thing. There's a link to an op-ed that was sent out because there was a woman. She was the administrative assistant for, I believe it was the communications department there. She had worked there for, decades, right? She had been what the faculty say, the glue that keeps it all together, right? They jokingly, like, the faculty would call her mom because of how much care this woman put into her job and did for them. During the pandemic, when most faculty and everything went all online, she stayed. She held down the fort. She made sure faculty had what they needed. She would drive things to faculty members' houses. There was one story in the letter that these faculty wrote in support of their colleague, the administrative assistant of their department, where she had to bring technology. She brought technology. She didn't have to. She chose to bring this stuff to the faculty member's house and show them how to use it, talking from the front lawn of their house through their window because we had to social distance and there was a huge outbreak. She went above and beyond all you could ask for an employee during the pandemic. And now they're returning to school and they got rid of her. They fired her. And as my friend Doug put it, the university knows all the costs and none of the values. They just kicked that woman to the curb after she was the glue that even made education possible in that department, and they threw her away. Steve Oross had put up, he had given to the university. I look, as long as I've known the guy, he's given to the university. And this is the thanks he gets. Yeah, You can just take unpaid leave. Sure, go ahead. Well, at least you get to keep your benefits. Well, that's a plus, given the fact that he just had open hearts, or he had just a heart transplant. Gee, you're so freaking kind. And so now, think about this. In my department, right, we had faculty members leave this last year, and there's complex reasons for that, and I'm not going to get into it. But just like, I mean, in terms of why they did, and one of them left, I know, for example, because she wanted kind of accommodation. She wanted to try to make it work because she had to take care of a sick family member. University said, nope. So she said, bye-bye. See ya. Okay. Then I'm gone. And I'm sure that the accountants in the administration also were like, oh, look, the money we just saved. Yeah, but guess what? What about the classes she was supposed to teach? Right now, we have one section of composition, right, that's full of students. It's got no teacher, right? And guess what? Our chair keeps on saying, look, I got to help. Somebody can help. Nobody wants to teach it. Why? Because we've been treated like crap. And now, Steve Oross, who's got a full schedule, he's looking for a way to make it work. And the administration is going to say, nope, see ya. Screw that. We're going to save the money. What about all those students? So he's going to probably retire. He's going to leave. He's not going to come back. Now you got 4 sections, 4 classes. I don't know what the enrollment is in each one of those classes, but now suddenly they don't have a faculty member. They could have had a faculty member. Yes, there would have been a little bit of adjustment, but now they don't have one. Kudos, KU. That's a caring community if I ever heard of one, right? And I should say this too as well. This is not the first time something like that. Oh, I should also say, before I even get into this next part, I also say is Steve is not the only faculty member who's dealing with this right now. He just happens to be the one who's put his name forward and said, I don't care. People need to know what's going on. People need to understand that when Kutztown University says it's a caring community, they mean it as far as their PR budget will take it, and that's it. You've heard me talk about what has happened in my building, the black mold in our building, and like Mike Gambone, like my friend Mike Gambone from the history department, walking around with ladders, inspecting buildings because the university won't do it, just to try to keep our workplaces safe. They won't touch it. They don't care. This is when you're talking about people's lives. I remember years ago, I believe this was when Mike Gambone was president of the university, we had faculty members that were getting sick with something that was called, like, I'm going to get the word wrong. It's called pleuria. I want to say pleuria. That's not what it is. Maybe it'll come to me. But it's a hardening of the lung tissue. Right? And the university would refuse to say, no, we're not going to give you an accommodation. We're not going to give you disability because blah, blah, blah. And it turns out the reason why they were getting sick is because there was gases leaking from an old shower in the building that they were teaching dance in. They didn't care. They denied the request. They denied the disability. They said, no, there's no problem. Wouldn't fix the building until they were forced to leave. They saved the money, and then they shut the building down. I could go on and on and on. But the one recent case that tracks so closely to this one that it makes me want to vomit, right, has to do with a case in 2017. Right, in 2017, and if we were doing a lot more writing over at ragingchickenpress.org at that point. And I'll put, I'll drop a link to this article in today's chat. Pleurisy, yes, Emily, thank you. Pleurisy, chemical pleurisy is what it was. What those numbers had. So this is a it's an article I wrote back in 2017. After I found out about this. It's called Precarious Life, Kutztown University Adjunct Kicked to the Curb Right Before Critical Surgery. All right, we should read you just a little bit of this. So on Wednesday morning, this was September 22nd. So on Wednesday morning, faculty members at Kutztown University opened their morning email to find a heart-wrenching message from Dr. Amanda Morris, president of the Kutztown chapter of the faculty union ABSCUF at that time. Quote, "Good morning, everyone. Although there is not much good about it today," unquote, the email began, "an adjunct faculty member is in need of major life-saving surgery," Morris explained. The surgery itself was not the problem. The problem was that the adjunct faculty member no longer had health insurance. Kutztown University had just fired that faculty member. The faculty member did not, quote, "have enough sick time to cover the estimated time that they would be out, which could possibly be the entire semester," unquote, Morris explained. So with critical surgery right around the corner, one of the university's most vulnerable faculty members was now out of work and without health insurance. Morris was alerted to the dire situation of the department chair the previous Thursday. The adjunct faculty member's colleagues had already agreed to overloads to cover courses, and that department's faculty, quote, "volunteered to donate their own sick time to alleviate this person's lack of sick time," unquote, wrote Morris. There was one hitch. Morris would need to secure a local agreement with management that would allow faculty members to donate their sick leave to their colleague. Morris never got the chance. In her email, she explained that late Monday afternoon, she got the bad news. Quote, "On Monday, the chair of this adjuncts department wrote me a simple email alerting me that HR had fired the person. Simultaneously, I discovered from another meeting that the person's benefits were cut off, leaving one of our most vulnerable colleagues without an income and without health insurance a couple weeks before major life-saving surgery." Morris told me in an email interview that she immediately contacted the university president, Kenneth Hawkinson, asking him to call her as soon as possible, which he did. And she said, "I explained to him the situation and asked him for his help," Morris told me. "I asked point blank for him to please intervene to work with me to fix this, because this decision to fire an individual and leave them without an income or benefits right before major life-saving surgery was just wrong." According to Morris, Hawkinson agreed to look into the matter and meet with her on Tuesday morning. But Tuesday morning brought more bad news. Morris met with the university president, Hawkinson, the provost, Dr. Ann Zayatz, and the director of human resources, Sharon Pikus, at the time. Quote, during this meeting, I could see that all three administrators had notes and directives that appeared to come directly from the chancellor's office, and that is how they presented them," Morris said. "They agreed with me about how awful the situation is, but deferred to the chancellor's office decision to not allow them, the local administration, to work a local agreement with me, or at that point to reinstate the faculty member." So that person was cut to the curb, throwing their hands up. There's nothing we can do. It's the way the cookie crumbles. It is what it is. Another life. People die all the time. That's what Kutztown University's caring community looks like from these perspectives. You're talking about somebody's most, here's the thing. They did not even offer to try to help find a solution. What ended up happening? Amanda Morris, I worked with her on this one. We publicized it on Raging Chicken. We did all that we could. Faculty members by themselves set up an account, a PayPal account, in that person's name. That person set it up or whatever like that. And we donated directly to cover their COBRA costs so they could maintain health insurance. If you're an adjunct faculty member, you don't have the money saved up to cover COBRA costs, which is the most expensive thing. It's a joke, really. Because we don't have freaking universal health care. This is what people are left with. And here, this is in 2017, right? 4 years ago. And they're doing it again. Same university president. Except in the intervening years, we've had a freaking pandemic. And here's the thing, here's the kicker. Is during the pandemic and before this, we have the Chancellor Greenstein, right? And our university president just mouths whatever the heck that guy will say, right? Except, Kenneth Hawkinson is a little bit less savvy about how he does it. He always looks like a grumpy old troll when he's talking about this stuff half the time, right? Because he gets pissed so quickly when he's questioned, his authority is questioned. He can't take it when he looks bad. Sorry, I'm getting upset. But this is what happens. They were telling us that we have to be more flexible. That when we're presented with a challenge, we should innovate and find ways of making it a win-win, right? You've heard me talk about the win-win stuff for a while, right? And you know what? During this past year, I know I'll speak for myself, but I also know a conversation I've had with multiple faculty members. We found things, we found tools, we found technological tools, we found different strategies for kind of engaging students online, right? In some ways, there's certain parts of our teaching that got better, right? Because we had to look at everything through fresh eyes again and thought about ways of engaging students. And I, for one, for example, found out that I had more students that were showing up to my office hours on Zoom than I did when I had my regular office hours on campus. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to incorporate that into my regular teaching now. Because if a student, if what's preventing a student from walking across to coming to my office hours is the fact that she'll have to walk from one end of the campus to the other. If that's what's stopping it, and I find out that if I use Zoom, she's more likely to, while she's sitting at her computer trying to figure something out, to kind of see if my office hours, click on Zoom and go meet. That makes sense. Right? I mean, that's just one tiny example. I could go like thousands of them that came up with this year. I mean, you know, Kathy Hartman was in my department, right? She like held these workshops over there, and we were working with all these different kind of technological tools for the classroom. And like, I'm like, man, I was so thankful, like that she did this stuff, and I'm like, holy, yeah, this is actually really beneficial. This really works. And not only was I using it for my online classes, but now I'm going to incorporate those same things in my regular classes. We were innovative. We were flexible, right? In the worst situations, we were. And now, when it comes to the administration being innovative and flexible and problem solving, they look at a guy who just had a heart transplant, who is being flexible and innovative and think about how he could come back and get back into teaching and serve those students. They're like, nope, we're going to be as rigid as a stone. And that's when you know that they are full of lies. That their flexibility, innovation, all that nonsense is just the same old thing that's been covered over and papered over and made to look pretty for, 40 years. It's just about austerity. It's just about asking people to work harder for less. It's about downsizing and maximizing the resources for the people at the top. That is all it is. Because when it comes down to it, if you are not privileging your workers, when it comes to things like safety, innovation, things like that, you know what? You're just lying. You're using it because it sounds good and it has been like tested language and focus groups that makes everybody feel good, and it's good PR. And that's why you can justify sinking millions of dollars into PR campaigns, but you can't justify giving a faculty member an accommodation to keep him safe. That, my friends, is my back to school story right now. The pit in the stomach, my stomach that I have, is made up of that. I could give you dozens of other examples that contribute to that pit in my stomach about going back to campus this fall. Yes, I have to go back. But this, when you're literally willing to put somebody in a no-win situation so that you can what? Smooth out your balance sheets? you've like separated yourself out from the freaking human race is what you've done. So this is why I wanted to come to you today. This is a story that should be blasted from newspapers and TV programs across the state, across the nation. Steve Oross has put himself out there and basically said, look, I don't care. I'm willing to have my story out there. My story needs to be out there because it might help other people too. People need to know this is what's going on because it's happening to more people than just me. That's what he told me. Even in the worst circumstances, this guy is thinking about other people. And not just in like, oh shucks, heart goes out to you. No, in saying my story might help others. What are we becoming? And what have we become when we allow this kind of stuff to go on? What does it mean? You know, this is what Emily said, right? In the in the chat today. You know, it's time to reinvigorate the labor movement. Yeah. What does it mean that a faculty union, for example, is going to throw up its hands and be like, well, nothing we can do about it? We're all going to feel bad for Steve. What does it mean that this is happening to, you know, administrative assistants out in Chicago, across the country? What does it mean that this is happening to frontline workers? You know, I have lots of people I know, right, family members and also who work in healthcare, and they'll be the first to tell you, healthcare is breaking down because they can't take it anymore. Because you know what? The same thing that happened to higher education started happening about 10 years ago is all happening to them now. And in the midst of the pandemic, guess what they found? A lot of good people saying, you know, support our frontline workers. Yeah, but you know, I'm not going to get a vaccine, or I'm not going to take my precautions. Support the troops, but I'm not going to do my part. This is bad. So, like I said, next week, assuming we can find the time, I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to find the times. I'm going to have Steve Oross on to talk about his story, and I'm hoping. I don't know. I don't have any confirmation of this too as well, but I know there's other faculty members who are in similar situations, and if they're willing to tell their story too as well, I'd love to have them on too with Steve, or independently. Doesn't matter to me. To let people know what's going on. And you know, this university, President Kenneth Hawkinson, and whoever directed the HR person to deny this request needs to be held personally accountable. They should be named in a lawsuit. And what's great about, this is one of the things I love about social media, right? There's a lot of it that I can't stand, but people are sharing stories now of lawsuits that are happening. Right, there's some that are happening right in New Jersey. Just got a story about this morning from someone, and some are here in Pennsylvania too as well. Right up, and I believe in the Lehigh Valley, they're going to be suing their university for denying ADA requests. Game on. And the question is where's everybody else is going to be in this? The irony of me telling you this story here today is I guarantee you this. I guarantee this. I'm not going to be making friends for doing this, but there will be faculty members and there will certainly administrators who are going to be pissed off at me and Steve for telling this story publicly. And they will say things like, the administration will say things like, you're giving the university bad press at a time of crisis. Bad PR. We're going to look bad. And then they're going to start blaming me for like the lack of retention figures or the lack of the ability to recruit students because we're not saying nice things about the university. Our former provost used to sit there and say like, you know, you need to have your elevator speech ready so that when you go talk to somebody, you could promote and talk about the good things at Kutztown. At the same time that they were sending an adjunct faculty member potentially to that person's demise because they fired them when they needed the health insurance the most. They see what they see as their crisis of enrollment or whatever like this as a PR problem. And I'm telling you right now, it is not a PR problem. It is a systemic, administrative, and fiscal approach that is the problem. And you're willing to throw actual people to the curb. Let them die. That's the problem. So listen, I know that a lot of people listening to this show are not faculty members, are not, students at Kutztown University. They're not family members of students at Kutztown University, but some of you are, and some of you know people who are. So if you are a faculty member, if you are a staff member, if you are a student at Kutztown University, if you are a family member of a student at Kutztown University, if you're a family member of a staff member, you can go, I put a link in today's show notes. It's in our show notes, yes, but it's also right now in our chat, right? To an open letter that they're sending to President Hawkinson and the Chancellor, Dan Greenstein, urging at the very freaking least what other college and universities across the country are beginning to come to sense of and doing, mandating vaccines. And in the absence of that mandate, having proof of vaccination, whether you say, are you vaccinated? Show proof. And if you are not going to show proof, then you have to subject yourself to testing and to follow that up with contact tracing. This is not hard. Yes, I agree, Emily. It's all related. This is a big problem in the community enclaves. I agree 100%. So listen, that's all I got for you today. I really appreciate you taking the time and kind of listening to this. What I'll also hope you'll do, make sure that you're going to kind of, like this stream. Make sure you're going to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this out with your friends. Emily asked who's the head of PASHI. The chancellor of PASHI is Daniel Greenstein, who's included on that open letter. So share it out with your friends. Like, tell other people about this stuff and share this story. And make sure that you tune in next week when you get to hear from Steve himself about what's going on. Look, and it's back to school, and everyone at the level of, if you got kids that are going back to school in K through 12, if you got kids that are going back to school for college, young adults going back to college, if you're a teacher or a staff member in a school or a college or university, you're going back, like, let's try to find ways of taking care of each other, right? And then when we see the systems around us abusing people, to refuse that collectively, to not stand by and allow the abuse to continue. Michael Brooks, who was the co-host of the Majority Report, just an amazing human being who died suddenly last year, used to say, be kind to individuals, be ruthless to systems. And I think that's where we have to be. Anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I appreciate all of you out there who take the time to kind of listen to the show and are doing whatever you can to keep people safe and, to bring justice and equity to this world. So you can tune in on Friday with our regular show with Sean Kitchen. We'll be talking about our politics and our news roundup for the week. I miss him too, Emily. Emily's about Michael Brooks. But until then, look, you can help support this show. You can support the work we could do. Try to get the voices of people out, to a broader context. You can help support this show by going to patreon.com/rcpress. You become a patron of the show for as little as $5 a month. Patreon.com/rcpress. Look forward to seeing you on the flip side, everybody.
There are no people
We're out.
in the future.
Let me
See
tell my people come.